Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay, and today we're going to talk about a fascinating subject about sacred geometry, Gateway to the Heavens. And we have with us the authoress of this book, Karen French. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
And we're going to talk, as I said, about Gateway to the Heavens, which sounds all very exotic. So what was the catalyst for you writing the book in the first place?
Right, well, I've always been very interested in how simple shapes pervade everything in life and how effectively we dress things up in either different languages or different areas of study, you know, philosophy or sciences, but essentially we're saying the same thing. And then I basically started thinking about how you would actually represent eternity and infinity and consciousness, these sort of very all-encompassing concepts. How would you draw them? How would you be able to represent them in some way that we could actually relate to them? And then I started noticing that certain words, the first letters of those words, English words, actually related to certain areas of reality that they were describing. And those first letters also looked like the shapes, those areas of reality they were describing. So, for example, C words, communication, connection, all related to circles and what circles did. And
so C is part of a circle.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
And there were certain V words that were related to triangles, and D words, which effectively are very angular, if you were to draw them angular.
So give some examples of V words somehow.
Vibration, vacuum.
Right. Okay.
Vibration in particular, because V's relate to triangles, which relate to what it is to be, being, and we're all different beings of light, of matter, and vibration is to do with, you know, the waves that we form on.
Yeah.
So that's where it all started, and so I started looking into geometry, because that's what it was all about at the end of the day.
And had you had experience of geometry before?
Not particularly, no. I've actually done a maths degree, but interestingly enough, we never actually covered geometry. It seems to be something that's not covered unless you're doing physics per se. And only area I'd come to contact with geometry before was actually in art, because I'm fairly artistic, and I was very interested in the past in how geometry was used within pictures to draw the eye into certain parts of it, or how people like the cubists actually used geometry, very obviously, to structure their pictures. So how geometry was used to organise pictures. So that's the only contact I've really had with it. But once I started actually delving into it, I started to realise that I'd actually come across geometry in business. I spent 20 years in business and in marketing, because we use it to organise models to convey information.
Okay, so tell us more about that, how it's used in business.
All right then. One example is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is in a triangular form. Right at the bottom, we have all the basic needs of to do with survival, food, and being able to live, sex, and all those types of things. And then you have the next level of need. So once you've satisfied the basic needs, you can move on to the next one, which is to do with social acceptance. And so the triangle goes on, and at the top is self-realisation and self-actualisation, which relates to the triangle, which is all about being and what it is to be. And and we use circles, for example, in ways of showing how you'd get to a customer. In marketing, we have the 4 Ps around that: product, pricing, packaging, which are all around satisfying the need of the customer. Squares in economic theory to do with SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So looking at a business opportunity or customers that you have, or economic environments in those sort of ways. So we use them to organise information.
Okay.
And that's so another area. And it helps to present information, and people remember it better if it's organised in that sort of way. So that's where I came across it then. But then obviously once I started looking, analysing these ideas of eternity, infinity, and noticing that they related to geometric shapes, and that these words related to them, well, the first letters certainly did, it started me off delving into geometry, and I discovered that it was in everything, absolutely everywhere. Basically, we use geometry to organise ourselves socially. It organises the way life forms, you know.
But you see, Karen, when you say it organises. What people would say would be, well, I'm social in certain ways. Ah, yes, okay, maybe you can make a geometric shape out of it, but they wouldn't say that it organised them.
No. But it's interesting because there are various areas of mathematical theory, which I won't go into, which help explain how things that are apparently chaotic are actually organised. The apparent chaos of a cloud is actually organised according to an area called fractal geometry, and the Mandelbrot set, which is this infinitely recurring patterns. They've discovered that the way people queue in car queues are actually very quite organised, and the way birds fly. So things that appear to be random are
I can see it with birds flying. I can see it with queues in Italy, queues in England, but not in queues in Italy. That seems to be chaotic to me. But maybe again, there's organisation within the chaos.
There is, and that really gets down to a level maths which is, beyond most of us, and certainly it's not something that I go into too much. But what I've discovered is that at a higher level, if you like, and if you live in tune with your environment, which are certainly our ancestors did, they were very, very aware of all those underlying basic patterns that organise their lives, simple circles, and the way the seasons go round. And, you have your circle of life, you're born and you live and you die. And all those sort of very, very simple shapes actually are sort of underpinning things that are actually quite complicated, and they all work together.
So how far can you trace this back in terms of our ancestors? When did you first...
Well, that's a very, very interesting one, because that was a conversation I was having that with a guy called John Martineau, who's written quite a few books on sacred geometry. And we believe it goes back to the birth of the human imagination, really, when we were actually be able to look behind things to understand what was making things happen. And when the birth of the human imagination came about, we actually started to be able to represent those ideas in some way. And who knows, but maybe it was around the time when we actually started drawing circles and spirals and things on rock faces or whatever. But at some point back in our development, we were no longer just looking at survival. We actually started questioning things, and that's when our imaginations came into play. And without our imaginations, we wouldn't be where we are now, because we wouldn't be able to imagine travelling into space and make that a reality, for example, or anything else like that. So whenever that happened, 70,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago...
So you're saying that sort of early man was more aware of this area than we are probably these days, because most of us aren't aware of how these shapes affect our lives.
Sort of at a very, very basic level, an animal that's very just surviving lives on their instincts. This is more than instincts. This is when you actually start to, at some point, observe your environment and make a conscious decision to do something because of an observation. Or through understanding it, you learn something and it changes your behaviour, or you do something as a result of it. And that's something about the human consciousness, which is very different from a lot of other things. Yet there is a theory, everything's made out of consciousness. What is interesting about the human consciousness is that we use it to learn, change our behaviour, share our experiences with other people, and learn as a result of it and evolve. And that's when our ancestors were very, very, very in tune and noticed all these patterns, and they came up with, over the centuries, obviously, very complicated calendars. Look at the Mayan calendar for predicting events and times and cycles. And we actually use very simple ones now, but the mathematical theories and things that they had up, coming up with the idea of the concept of zero that the Indians did, is phenomenal. Things we take for granted, which are all done through observation.
I have to ask you something that's just currently off the script. Why does the Mayan calendar end in 2012, whenever it is?
Me.
What's going to happen then? You got any theories on that?
Are we going to go on to that theory?
Well, just briefly.
That, from my perspective, and this is just a theory, obviously, an idea, is if you look at all the ideas about the universe and the idea of the universe starting from at some point or another,